All right. All right. Hi, everybody. I apologize for our technical issues as we struggled to set up a slideshow to go along with this presentation. I hope that everybody is still tuned in and didn't give up on us. Again, I apologize for that problem with the technology. So, hello and welcome to our Final Friday program. We're streaming from the Lawrence Public Library Sound and Vision Studio. And at the Watkins Museum of History in Lawrence, we are very excited to debut a new exhibit on May 6th. Using a trove of photographs recently donated to the museum, this exhibit, titled Familiar Faces, the Gary Davis Photo Collection, will chronicle the everyday lives of several Black families in Lawrence, in a close-knit North Lawrence neighborhood, from the late 19th to the mid-20th century. Today, in connection with this upcoming exhibit, we're partnering with Humanities Kansas to invite a guest speaker who is an expert on another historic Kansas Black community, Nicodemus. Angela Bates is the executive director and past president of the Nicodemus Historical Society. Working with the Nicodemus community, the National Park Service, and Senators Dole and Roberts, she helped designate Nicodemus as a National Historic Site. Angela, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invite. And I'm ready to go and pretty excited about the information I want to share.
We're excited too. I'll remind everyone in the audience that you can post comments and questions for Angela's presentation, and we will address those at the end. And now I invite Angela to present Children of the Promised Land.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I just want to say thank you to the Humanities Kansas, because it's because of them that I can be all over the state without having to move too far away from my computer. So it's always a pleasure to be able to do a program for the Kansas Humanities. This program is about Children of the Promised Land, and this is about the first and second generation of children born free here in Kansas after the emancipation and after the migration west to the little town of Nicodemus. And the presentation is really centered around one word, and that word is choice. No choice during the antebellum years and slavery, and then choice after emancipation. And so I'm going to try to contrast the life of those children, the life of those parents prior to, and then after emancipation. So I'm going to try to go ahead and move forward so we can see some of these photographs and talk to you about these children of the Promised Land. As I said, in slavery, there was no choice. It was the senior and infirm women that took care of these children while the parents worked. And children didn't work until they were about 6 years old. And work was usually taking care of menial jobs, carrying waters, fanning their playmates or their masters, carrying things to them, and emptying chamber pots, things like that. Those were the little menial tasks that these little children would do. And then when they were about 12, that's when they really started to do real adult work. And again, it was the old women and the infirm women that took care of these children while their parents worked. Some of the fears of the children, they were afraid that their parents were going to be sold away, their children, their siblings would be sold away, that they may be beaten like others that they had seen, that they would not have enough food, they would not have adequate clothing, that their masters would keep them from their parents, and they would be taken advantage of sexually. These were the fears of the children. And children as slaves, it wasn't a good situation for them because they were always under the control of their masters, opposed to thinking that they were under the control of their parents. And the fears of the mothers. They were very, very fearful of a lot of things, that they had no control over selecting their sexual partners. If a master decided that he wanted two slaves to get together because of the way that they looked physically, and he thought they were going to produce a certain type of muscular child or what have you, then he would put those two slaves together. So they didn't have necessarily a say as to who their partners were. There were also
Angela, I'm sorry. May I interrupt you for
Yes.
just a second? Are
Yes.
you advancing in the slides?
Yes, I am.
We only see the first slide sponsored by Kansas Humanities Council.
Okay, and it says I'm in the sharing window. Huh.
Yeah.
You want me to stop sharing, or it's really weird.
Yeah, perhaps let me remove it and then your slideshow, and then I'll bring it back here. I'll add it to the stream again.
Okay.
Okay. So I brought it back on this in the stream. Now you may have to unshare and share again.
Okay, I'll do that.
And
I'll stop sharing now.
Okay. Folks, we appreciate your patience as we work through these technological issues. Working from a new studio always adds some interesting developments like this.
Okay, I'm going to go in and share the screen.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, can you see that?
Okay, so I added it to the stream again, and what we are seeing is fears of the mothers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Again, they had fears of their masters taking advantage of them sexually. They were also fearful of being beaten, or being scapegoated by the mistresses. Mistresses didn't have any control over their husbands and what they did, and many times a master would take a particular slave that he liked, and sometimes they actually brought them into the house and had separate rooms for them. And so the mistresses, the only way they could retaliate sometimes would actually be to take it out on that particular woman. And that could be seen in that movie 12 Years a Slave, where they're in the house dancing, and the mistress takes a cup or a glass or something and throws and hits her. And I mean, the slave woman didn't have any choice in any of the matter, but sometimes she was the scapegoat by her mistresses, by their mistress. They didn't have any control over naming their children. If you wanted to name your child Princess, like in the movie Queen, with Halle Berry playing the slave daughter of the master. This was a sequel to Alex Haley's movie. She has her child, and the child, when she's about 4 or 5 years old, gets taken and works in the house. But when she has the child, she wants to name the little girl Princess. But the master says, no, I want to name her Queen. So many times you didn't have any choice in naming your children. Now, this is not the case all the time, but these are the kinds of things that would be diverse from one plantation to the next, but pretty common to most. There was no control over the children's working arrangements. They had no way of saying, well, you need to do this today or that. The masters were the ones that told the children and their mothers what they would be doing. They were fearful that their children would be sold away or taken away in estate sales and that kind of thing, and that their children would be beaten. It would be horrible to see your child being beaten, but they were fearful of that. And they were also fearful that the children would be taken advantage of sexually. So those are the kinds of things that they were literally afraid of. Okay, after emancipation, and what's happening at emancipation and Reconstruction? During Reconstruction, obviously there was fear, there was confusion, brutality was running rampant. People were afraid. The African Americans that had been enslaved, they didn't know what to do, they didn't know where to go, they didn't know what was going to happen to them. And the whites, that owned these slaves, they had lost their economic viability and their ability to control their assets, which were these slaves, these chattel slaves. And so they were trying to control them, and Jim Crow literally started to develop and rear its ugly head during this time period. So this was their way of trying to keep control over a situation that was getting out of control. So the whites were trying to institute these Jim Crow laws, and blacks were just afraid and didn't know where to go. Families did try to reunite, or families were actually split at that moment. And movement caused fear. So when slaves started to move around, or these former slaves started to move around, there was a lot of confusion, dislocation of people, families and individuals. People, they just didn't know what to do. And families were divided along color lines. All of the slaves, not all, but in many instances, you had slaves that were relegated to work in the house, and many of these children and these slaves were really the product of their masters. And so many of them were mulattoes or quadroons or what have you. So now freedom has come. Where do they find their place? So they're being shunned by their white relatives, and they were being shunned by the ones that were in the quarters, so to speak. Part of this division was designed to keep slaves divided. So they were divided along the color lines during slavery, and they were taught to resent one another because of the color of their skin. So this became very apparent during Reconstruction, when African Americans are beginning to move around and try to reconnect with their families and what have you. So there was this rejection on both parts of these mulattoes. And many families were multiple families. They had multiple parents, there were multiple children in one particular family. So during Reconstruction, it was just amazing what was actually going on. Here we start to see freedom of choice. So I'm emancipated now, and I'm a woman, and I can choose my partner. If I don't want to be with the man that I had been with during slavery because my master said that's who I needed to be with, I'm choosing my partner now. I'm choosing the children's names that I want to give them. Here's an example of a name change that actually happened here in Nicodemus. We have a lady that comes here. She's pregnant at the end of the Civil War, and she has the baby Free, obviously, and she changes the name of that child, and it's different than the rest of the children's names. All of them have the last name of Worthington, except for her last child. And she names that child after her first slave's name, which was Craig. And so she exercises her right as a mother and having the choice to change the name to the name that she wants it to reflect. Women were free from fear of their children being sold away. What a burden that was lifted from them, not to have to worry about their children now being taken or sold away from them. And they had the choice to provide the education and the religious training for these children. Okay, in the case of Nicodemus, we're going to talk a little bit more specifically about it. You know, African Americans, obviously, during the very end of Reconstruction, when the military is being pulled out and really havoc is beginning to really take place during Reconstruction, with a lot of violence going on. Out here in the West, towns were being built. Towns were being organized by immigrants, and this was also the case with African Americans. And so here you see a white speculator by the name of W.R. Hill going into partnership with 5 African American ministers, and one is already a homesteader. And they create the Nicodemus Town Company, plat the land plat the town site on a land just north of the Solomon River in Graham County. They decide to go back home, and home is Kentucky. They go back there to solicit people to come out. And so that's why there is that Kansas-Kentucky connection. And there were a few people from Tennessee and some others that trickled in from Mississippi and some other places. But primarily, the major group of people that settled in Nicodemus were from Kentucky. So they go back there, and they bring these people to Kansas so that they can settle in an all-black town. There were white merchants that were there. There were always white merchants in the beginning, but then when the railroad bypassed Nicodemus, we lost the white merchants, and the town pretty much became what it intended to be, which was an all-black community. But people began to experience freedom in a way that they couldn't experience in Kentucky. It cost them $5 to join the Nicodemus Town Company, and then they were secured a place with the group that they were taking to Kansas. Of course, they had to pay for their own train tickets and the shipping of their goods and all, but it cost $5 to join the Nicodemus Town Company. So who were these people, and who were these children and these young mothers? There was babies, there was toddlers, there were young children and teens, there were siblings, people that were related as well as friends. Some that had been born into slavery, but in 1877, when they arrived in Nicodemus, they arrived on the free soils of Kansas, and it was shortly thereafter that one of the first babies were born in Nicodemus. And what did the mothers think, and how do they feel? Again, this is the first time mothers are having children born free. Their births and their pregnancies and rearing of their children all are happening in a free state and without the physical and psychological effects of rearing these children in the institution of slavery. So they have a choice now. The first baby that was born in Nicodemus was born to a lady that's seated here with her husband. She is my great-grandmother. Her name is Emma. She was a Johnson. She was on the Johnson plantation before she came to Kansas, and she married a man by the name of Charles Williams. And they had 5 kids. One of the kids are not seen on this particular photograph, but the first baby that was born was the boy in the back in the center. His name was Henry. She named her first son, after her brother Henry. That was a typical naming practice for African Americans during slavery, to keep track of your children. You would, if you had the choice, you would name your children after your sisters and brothers, and if not after your sisters and brothers, you would name them after your master's sisters and brothers. That way, if you were sold away and you were at another plantation, you could trace your genealogy, so to speak, back to that plantation and back to those particular slaves. And so she named her first son after her brother Henry. Her second son, who was standing next to him on the left-hand side, he is actually Charles, named after his dad, and that's my grandfather. And then the little girl with the very short hair in the black dress, that's her daughter. It was really her second daughter. Her first daughter, who's not pictured here, had burned in a fire after iron caught on fire that she was ironing with. But the little girl here is Ora Schweitzer's mother, and her name was Clara. Now, Ora Schweitzer is the mother of Verl Schweitzer. Many people may know who Verl Schweitzer is. Played for K-State and then went on to play professionally for the Green Bay Packers. But this is his grandmother here, and her name was Clara. And the little boy that's standing in front of her that almost looks like a little girl because he's got long braids, his name is Neil. But this was one of the first families that arrived in Nicodemus in 1877 with that group. And like I said, my great-grandmother Emma was pregnant at the time, and within a month she had the first baby born to freedom on the free soils of Kansas. So the next several slides that you're going to see are from our photographs that we have at the University of Kansas. The Nicodemus Historical Society processes photographs in written materials, and then we send them on to our collection at KU. And there's thousands of historical photographs at the Spencer Research Library, the Nicodemus Society collection. And so this particular project came out as it was birthed out of the fact that I wanted to share with our members and with our patrons some of the historical photographs that we had. And so I selected, out of over 500 photographs of children, I selected about 210 and put them in a photographic book. that's called the Children of the Promised Land. So you'll get a chance to see these young children. And what I want you to note is how they're dressed, where they are, and the fact that if you just put this in the right kind of context, think about why is it that we have these photographs, and why is it that these particular photographs are of children? Why was it so important for them to actually photograph their children? This particular photograph of the little girl is one of my favorites. I have two. I'm kind of partial to all of them, but there's a couple that I really find very, very interesting. And this one of the little girl is obviously a studio photograph, but it's really neat to see the little children smiling and being depicted in these photographs. They say so much more compared to slave photographs of children. Again, choice and no choice. They chose to cherish their children and take photographs of them. So they left this legacy for us to share with the world, and that's what I'm trying to do, is show how these children are in contrast with those that you see that were former slaves. And I'll just go through them, and I'll make a comment here or there about them. Again, many of these photographs that you will see are studio photographs. That meant that the parents thought enough of their children to take them to studios to have them photographed. Many people didn't have the means or the luxury to spend money on photographs, but this was important to these people. And a lot of the children I know the names of, many of them that I don't. Obviously, the ones that I do know are people that I knew growing up. Like this little girl is my dad's first cousin, and her name is Fredonia. And when I was growing up, people kept saying I look like Fredonia. Well, when I seen pictures of her as a little girl, I could kind of relate to what they were saying. Obviously, this is not a studio photograph, but again, it's important that they capture these moments with their children. Obviously, a studio photograph. I know this little boy. I knew him as an old man, worn white. Obviously, another studio photograph. She looks like she's a little shy, but look at the way she's dressed. Again, these are people out on the high plains, desolate high plains of Kansas. And when they have an opportunity to go to town, or if they go to the bigger cities, they're taking the advantage of the opportunity to have their children taken pictures of. This is Buddy Alexander, who's deceased now. He was my dad's. He was a senior to my dad. But a lot of people remember Gil Alexander, who was a farmer out in Nicodemus. He died a few years back. One of the bigger farmers in the state of Kansas. He headed up the Kansas Black Farmers. This is his dad. Obviously, another studio photograph. There's that one that's one of my favorite, that little hat on. Obviously, I wonder how they got her to pose like that to get ready to ring that bell and then get that shot. But these are just precious gems. Another studio shot. This little boy is an Alexander. This is my great uncle. Another studio shot. I don't know why he's dressed like that, other than the fact that they probably put those clothes on them to take that particular photograph at that studio. But this was my great uncle, Harry Bates. Just proud mothers and their children. Obviously not a studio photograph, but let's take a picture of, and I'm not sure who this is, but obviously I wanted to take a picture of that little girl in particular. Again, a mother, and looks like, and I'm not sure who they are, but two little girls that are either cousins and or maybe siblings, but they look like they may be the same age. But again, let's take pictures of them. Oh, I think this is one of those places where they were traveling and wanted to take a photograph. This is a very interesting photograph because I know who those children are, as well as the man and woman who are the parents. These are the little boy and the little, I believe it's a little boy and a little girl that are in the carriage, and those are their parents, and this is an Alexander family. Obviously not a studio photograph, but here's a little black boy with his dog playing with his white friends. Kids know how to break the racial barrier. Next several photographs are siblings. The little girl that's seated, not the baby, is an aunt, a great aunt. She was married to the little boy that was my great uncle Harry Bates. But this is her and her two siblings as young girls. Again, I believe this is a studio photograph. This is an interesting photograph because these little kids right here are definitely little country bumpkin kids that are living in Nicodemus. I can tell by the building way in the background where this is located. But those are the kids when they became city bumpkins. That's when they were country. And the little girl with her hand in her mouth is me. And that's me with the little white dress on, holding it out. That's when we moved to California. We moved to California in 1956, and I think I was about 4 or 5 years old at the time that we moved. And so I grew up in Pasadena, but my early years were spent in Nicodemus. Additional studio photographs. These little girls are two siblings. This is the Alexander girls that were in the previous photographs that were sitting in the chairs. Obviously, another studio photograph, just precious. A little girl and her sister, her baby sister. Again, look at how they're dressed. And these are Nicodemus settlers and their children, first and second generation. The next couple of photographs, these are all one family. These are the Alexander family, another Alexander family, and these are their children. And those are the siblings that are a little bit older. Same studio, as you can see the background. But again, it's important that they photograph their children. Now, this photograph is a lady and her two daughters. The lady that's seated there is my great-great-grandmother, America Bates, and two of her daughters. This is a photograph of, let me see which one. No, this is my other great-grandmother and her four daughters. One of her daughters, one of her sons married one of her daughters. Again, it's important that, we're taking photographs of our youth. This is another one of my favorite photographs. I just love the expression on these two brothers' face. They're looking quite stoic. And of course, in those days when they were taking photographs, a lot of times they were told not to smile, especially when they had to take photographs where they had to, get everything prepared and, you had to hold your position and all of that. So sometimes it was easier for them not to smile. This is another one of my favorite photographs. This little girl with her hat on and her glasses and her little Sunday dress. It's just a beautiful little photograph. Again, taking this photograph was important to her parents. Oops, I don't know why that one didn't have a title. These are kids playing, building. Obviously, it looks like a snowman, but it looks like there's leaves on the trees in the back. So I don't know. And it hasn't been photoshopped. But these are kids in Nicodemus playing. I think this was a graduation photograph. This was Mary Alexander. So we do have in our collection photographs of these children going to school and class photographs. The little young man in this photograph that's seated there is my great uncle. That's my grandfather's brother. He went to school in Stockton. Here's the Fairview School, just 1 mile north of Nicodemus, and the teacher, who we believe is Lula Craig, and all of those kids that are on there were my grandparents' age. And I'll end this presentation pretty much with that little girl who was me when I moved to California, and I think that's my kindergarten picture. This really concludes my presentation. I guess we'll be ready to take any questions so we can have some type of dialogue.
Sure. Angela, I'll just say thank you for that excellent slideshow. And I wasn't aware that we'd be treated to photos of yourself as a little girl. So that's quite a treat.
Thank you.
So we do have some questions here.
Okay.
So Dorothy wanted to know, is there a link available for the photos in your collection?
Believe it or not, tomorrow I have a meeting with Deborah Dandridge, who's the archivist there. We've had one meeting with the university. They have digitized a number of photographs in our very, very first collection that we donated to them. And I'm not sure exactly when they're going to go online, but we will be making the announcements, and Kay, you will be making the announcement that there will be access to these digital photographs.
Great. We have a question here from Jen. Let's see if I can find it in the stack here. Yeah. Lovely photos. Are all or most identified by first and last names?
Yes. Many of them, I've gone through them myself, and the ones that I know, I have identified, and many of the photographs actually have the names on the back. But there are quite a few that don't. And when we first started getting our collection, we had community meetings where we brought them all out, and the older people that are all gone now tried to identify as many as they could.
Excellent. Here's another, well, this is more of a comment from Cheryl. My grandmother lived in Nicodemus in the 80s. I've been to several reunions there. Always loved visiting.
I wonder if that's wonder who that is.
Yeah. Well, maybe she'll tell us in the comments here in a
Okay.
while.
Okay.
Then here's a question for you. Does Angela still have family living in Nicodemus?
Absolutely. Pretty much everybody that lives there except for the minister and his family, we're all related. And we're all descendants of that Williams family where the first baby was born. And the few people that are not descendants directly from that family have married into that family. So everybody that lives there, we're all related. My brother just moved back from Belgium with his wife, and they bought a house, and he wanted to be at home. And so in the evening of his life, he can actually sit on his heels, so to speak, and overlook the town of Nicodemus and feel comfortable knowing he's back at home. But and then we have a few people that have just purchased some additional properties. We've got some tiny houses that are going up. We're trying to make Nicodemus accessible for those descendants that would like to move back. But it is a difficult situation in that it's harder now than it was before, even when I was moving back, because there are less people that actually own land. And with that kind of a situation, and a lot of people wanting to sell their land, it's kind of difficult to actually move back into Nicodemus, but people are buying houses in and around the area. And my sisters and I inherited our dad and mom's 40-acre farm just 1 mile north of Nicodemus, and we use it as a guest house. We don't advertise it. We just kind of we select people that are interested in coming and that will appreciate their surroundings. And so we get pretty picky about who we let stay at the farm, but we do accommodate people.
And here, okay, so Cheryl provided an answer to her statement before about her grandmother, Irma Curtis Wellington. She was married to Thomas Wellington.
Oh, yes. I remember Irma. I remember when she left Nicodemus and ended up moving back to Salina. I remember when she lived in the villa. Okay, well, I'm going to shout out to Cheryl. Can I ask Cheryl, where does she live? If that's all right.
Yeah, Cheryl, go ahead. If you're comfortable with that, let us Angela know where you live. Yeah. Here's another question in the meantime.
Okay.
Does the National Historical Site feature your family?
Does the National Park Service, basically, because that's the National Historic Site. When you say feature my family, we work with them on exhibits and collaborate with them on programs and what have you. And what we try to do, because we are the resource, is to provide as much family history and family photographs as possible in exhibits and programs that we do. So we try to be as inclusive as possible. Yes. So yes, the answer is yes. And when you say my family, I can say I'm related to about 70% of those original settlers, and most of the descendants that are alive today, I can kind of trace my genealogy through their family. So when you look at the Williams family, you look at a great percentage of people that are descendants that are connected to Nicodemus through those families.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, here's another question from Shelley. Is there any recollection of the Bradshaw family? Where my mother's family was located.
Well, Bradshaws were down in the Jetmore area. There were a Bradford family. My great grandmother was an illegitimate child, but she was a Bradford, but not a Bradshaw. I am familiar with the Bradshaws and out of the Jetmore area.
Great. So Jen would like to know, let's see if I can find that question again. Yeah. What year did the first students graduate from Nicodemus High School?
Well, first of all, they didn't have a high school. They had the one-room school. And I would say if the school was started in 1877 and they went from first grade to the 8th grade, 77 plus 8 years, what are we looking at? Do the math. I can't think about it right now, but what is it? 1886, somewhere around there.
Okay. Here's some more questions. How many people now live in Nicodemus, and how many Nicodemus descendants attend the homecomings?
Right now, there's about 23 people that actually live in Nicodemus. There's quite a few descendants that live in the surrounding area. I don't live in Nicodemus. I live in Bogue. And then I have a lot of family that lives in Hill City. And there are some that live in Stockton and other places. So there's only about 20 some people that actually live on the town site. How many people come to the celebration? It varies from year to year, but we hope it continues to grow. Last year was the year after the pandemic, and when we had the homecoming during the pandemic, what we actually did, we had it virtual. And we had over 200 people participating throughout the weekend doing it virtually. Last year, we probably had about 500 people that came last year. It depends from year to year. You have some descendants that don't come this year, but maybe they'll come the next year. So we're hoping to increase, the number of participants and that are coming to the Emancipation celebration. And now that, an Emancipation holiday has been set, even though it's Juneteenth, and that was really when the slaves in the um, Texas found out that they were free. We always celebrate in and around August the 1st. August the 1st was always the emancipation of the date that we celebrated our celebration until the late 50s and 60s, when everybody in my parents' generation really moved away. And they would come back for this celebration, and we started calling it homecoming. But it is indeed an emancipation celebration. So, and it's open to any and everyone that wants to come.
Good. Here's another question. Angela, you mentioned the National Park Service site. Is there a city museum that displays any artifacts?
Yes. Our little museum, which is Busting at the Seams, is where we house our artifacts, and we house a lot of the duplicates of the photographs that we have that we use for displays inside the museum, as well as exhibits that we take up to the Park Service and utilize. So yes, there is a museum with artifacts, but we're busting at the seams. We're in the process of collecting donations to actually build a museum for the community. The National Park Service has plans, finally, to build a visitor center, and that will free up our township hall for public events again. But that's down the line. It may take 3 to 5 years for that to actually happen. But we do have our own little museum, and we want to build a museum so we can showcase what we actually have. For example, there were 6 NFL players that have their roots in Nicodemus, and all of them, and including Gail Sayers, who just died, in the last year, have donated stuff to our museum, and want to donate a lot more as soon as we can actually build one that can be really secure.
That's wonderful. Here is a quick follow-up from Cheryl, who mentioned the Irma and Amos Wellington. She lives in Lawrence.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Shout out to Cheryl. Get in touch with us, Cheryl.
So that's probably a good time to wrap it up. And I just want to say thank you very much, Angela, for providing us with this fantastic slideshow and history of Nicodemus.
Thank you so very much. Thank you. And, anyone can get on our website, the Nicodemus Historical Society.org. There's tons of photographs on there, tons of history. There's a gift shop on there, and you can order all kinds of items. And so we encourage you to stay in touch with us and join the Nicodemus Historical Society. And thank you.
Yes. Yes, thank you. And thank you to everyone who joined us online for this special event. And with that, I will just say thanks, Angela, again, and thanks to all of you.
Thank you.
We'll say bye for now.
Thank you.